Hey everyone, it's Susan Pierce Thompson and welcome to the weekly vlog. So this is in many ways the most intense time of year for me. It's right before our annual Bright Line Eating family reunion. That's the one live event that I put on each year. And it's basically me on stage for 3.5 days. And getting ready to do that is, I'm each year as it rolls around, I'm experiencing the intensity of getting ready to do that. Having stuff to say and do and, lead people through an experience from the front of the room. It's so much harder than being a professor was and preparing that content. And I've thought pretty deeply about the difference. As a professor, I used to be able to prepare a PowerPoint lecture, for example, but it was never longer than an hour and 20 minutes at a time. A Tuesday, Thursday class would be an hour and 20 minutes, and then I'd get a couple days to prepare the next one. This is preparing in bulk to be on stage for 3.5 days, and it's just, it's enormously pressurizing to get ready for something of this magnitude. But what I love about it is that I always learn so much because I create content from scratch. This isn't like out of a textbook or whatever. Like, yeah, I read books and stuff to get ready, but I create a fresh curriculum, a fresh workshop, a fresh experience each year for the participants of the family reunion. And that is another thing that's different from being a professor. As a professor, there was always some sort of curriculum or some sort of textbook. And this is, I create this from kind of from scratch. And there's always a theme. This year, the theme is self-compassion. And I've been noticing in our Bright Line Eating community, collectively speaking, in general, how hard we are on ourselves. And I've also been noticing the research on self-compassion, which has been exploding. Since the first scientific paper was published on self-compassion in 2003, 1,000 papers have been published on self-compassion, and over half of those since 2015. So the rate of publication on self-compassion has been growing exponentially. And what we're finding is that self-compassion has all the benefits of self-esteem and then some. Self-esteem tends to abandon us when our egos are threatened or when we don't perform well, when we fall short in our own eyes. But self-compassion doesn't. That's actually exactly when self-compassion swoops in and buoys us up and protects us from the potentially harmful or negative repercussions of a failure or a setback. So self-compassion is one of the key ingredients to resilience, essentially. And, struggling with food and weight or striving to eat healthfully in an environment that doesn't support that, right? The current environment it continues to be incredibly obesogenic and incredibly, what's the word? Deaf, dumb, and blind, like ignorant to what it really takes to eat well and to avoid the brain damage that comes from eating the standard American diet. And I use that term scientifically. Brain damage is exactly what it produces. I use that term as a neuroscientist. Brain damage is what happens when you eat the way the standard American, eats, or I guess it's now the global world industrial diet or whatever they're calling it, the diet that we're exporting as Americans around the world, and we're seeing it crop up in China and in India and pretty much all around the world. So our culture is still completely blind to, not completely, but relatively blind to the impact of the food that we're eating. And people are not sort of cognizant of the fact that somewhere between 60 and 70% of us are dying too early of preventable diseases from the foods that we're putting in our mouths. And so if you're trying to swim upstream from all that, with the social pressure that comes from people saying, that sounds extreme. Why are you, why won't you eat pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving? That's ridiculous. This isn't a day to diet, blah, 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 right? If you're trying to swim upstream against that current, it's hard. It's hard. And it's, for most people, not a perfectly smooth journey. And this is why self-compassion is so important. Most of us come into Bright Line Eating with decades of habits already hardwired into our brain in the form of fiber tracks, cue, response, behavior, associations in the brain, to feel certain feelings and eat a certain way, to see certain cues or stimuli, whether it's, the sight of a snack bar at a movie theater, or the sight of a buffet spread at a Girl Scout event, or whatever it is, right? And to behave a certain way in that situation. We come with decades of programming. And in Bright Line Eating, we take on the monumental task of doing it differently, of undoing all that. And it's hard. And for almost all of us, it's not a straight line and it's not a perfect journey. This is a journey on which during which self-compassion is the thing. It is absolutely the foundation for being willing to be unstoppable. Because if you keep falling down and beating yourself up on the way down, it's harder to get back up. But if you learn to be a really gentle, kind, loving friend to yourself as you bobble and fumble and slip and slide, that's the climate in which getting back up again is really possible and tolerable. So in this quest for not just the attitude of self-compassion, the skills of self-compassion, but also the real psychological substrate that would support self-compassion. I mean, deep, deep down, how can we learn to be more self-compassionate? I've been partnering with someone named Everett Considine. I don't know if you've heard this name before. Everett Considine is one of us. He's a Bright Lifer. So he did the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp. I actually met Everett Considine way back. Way back, in Bright Line Eating terms, way back in 2014, 2015. One of our very first boot campers and first Bright Line Eating employees, Lyndon Morris Del Rio, well, she's in Canada, so she's a contractor, but Lyndon Morris Del Rio was working with Everett Considine as one of his clients. And she said early on, she said, Susan, you got to meet this guy. And the work that he does could be really foundational for Bright Line Eating. He does a kind of work called parts work. And the history of it, or the official theory of it or whatever is internal family systems, IFS. So the idea is that inside of us, we have a family of parts. In other words, we're not just one inside of us, inside of our minds, inside of our hearts. We're not just one, we're many. Socrates pointed this out. He said, one mind cannot both want and not want at the same time. Therefore, we are at least two minds. We are at least dual. The mind is not one. The mind is at least dual, probably more. So I think anyone who's struggled with food really gets that at a deep level, because we can feel inside of us, there's this part that wants to just indulge, right? There's the part that wants a handful of nuts after dinner. There's the part that wants, the pizza that everyone else is eating. There's the part that wants to indulge. And then there's a controller part that really wants to get it right this time and does not want to go down the same rabbit holes with food that we've always gone down, and wants to batten up the hatches and shore it all up and just do it, by the book. And these two parts war inside of us, the indulger and the controller. If you're bulimic or a binge eater, you might call it the binge part, right? And then there's this part that's trying to manage it, right? To control it. Now, behind that indulger is usually some pain. It's a wounded child part. And I called Everett yesterday because I'd noticed my Indulger getting active, and I'd never identified it before. But I was all excited after I'd been talking with him and learning about the work that he does with our Bright Lifers. He's been working now with our Bright Lifers. He has a private practice, and pretty much all of his clients for the last 2.5 years have come from Bright Line Eating. I've been referring people to him. Oh, you should work with Everett. Oh, you should work with Everett. I did several sessions with him back in 2015. It was enormously helpful for me. I've just continued the dialogue with him around what does it look like to develop genuine self-compassion? And the answer is it emerges as you develop compassion for your parts and why they try to hijack the system and what they really want, right? Like the Indulger, it's not trying to make us fat and miserable. The Indulger is trying to make us happy and comfortable. And, the MO is to do that by getting more food. But really, that's the aim of the Indulger, is to make us happier and more comfortable when we're in pain, right? And so once you kind of listen to the Indulger and understand what they're after, it's really easy to feel compassion for that motive, right? Oh, my Indulger just wants me to be, at ease. Like my Indulger wants to take the stress off. And so, that's why it's, making me reach for this handful of nuts, because it just wants a little, like the Winnie the Pooh thing, a little something would be nice. That's the Indulger. Which, if you're not someone who has identified themselves as someone who needs to do Bright Line Eating, might be just fine. Like one of my childhood best friends, she eats, a big cookie or a big sweet thing every day. She's always been in a right-sized body, and it's not a problem for her. It's not a problem at all. For me, that's a problem. It doesn't stop there. And my system, unfortunately, I have one of these brains that's high on the susceptibility scale. She's a 1 on the susceptibility scale. It doesn't impact her at all to indulge a little bit. For me, the impact is enormous. So I called Everett yesterday and I said, Everett, I've identified my Indulger. Like I noticed that instead of eating the dinner that I'd planned yesterday, I took myself out to dinner. And I did that knowing that I would get, a heavier, oilier, sort of more comfortable, more satisfying meal. It was still a Bright Line meal. It was all vegetables and some protein. And it was a perfect Bright Line meal, but it was a meal that sort of satisfied my system more than what I had written down that I was going to eat at home. And Everett said, so when did you make that choice? What was going on? And I identified some stress that had come up during my day. And it's a very familiar form of stress for me in my life. I'm in a season in my life where it's all just too much. Like the motherhood, the Bright Line Eating thing, and I don't mean doing Bright Line Eating, I mean running the Bright Line Eating enterprise, like just doing it all is just too much. And it's the weekend before I had to leave for 2 weeks, not getting back for 2 weeks, and I had to pack and prepare and shoot a bunch of videos, and then it was Father's Day, and then there was and then the kids wanted all of my time. We, wanted to go to the pool. It was going to be hot. And I was just looking at the day and thinking, there's no way to do all this. There's no way to make everybody happy. Like there's no way, to do well at all the things that matter to me today. I'm going to have to let my husband down, my kids down, myself down. Something's going to have to drop. Some ball is going to have to drop. And the feeling was stress and overwhelm, but it was also like a feeling of checkmate. Like life was checkmating me, that I was staring into the face of a day that just couldn't be navigated with giving the love and time and attention to everything that I wanted to. And I felt like I was backed into a corner and trapped. And I turned my car around and I went out to eat. And I called Everett afterwards. I was like, I think I identified my Indulger part. And he's like, yeah, that was it. And what was the pain right before that? I was like, the pain was feeling trapped and checkmated by my life, just like overwhelmed and trapped. And he said, yeah. And, I can look at that pain and say, okay, can I can I make accommodations so that I experience that less? And in my life, mostly the answer is no. Like, I'm doing a lot of things to try to lessen my overwhelm, and I keep trying to do them. But ultimately, with 3 little kids and the bright line eating movement the way it is, and my commitment to that, and marriage and my own self-care and my own, addicted brain. I always say having a brain like mine is like having a special needs child. So I don't really have 3 children. I have 4, my 3 kids and my own gimpy brain. It's a lot to handle, it just is. And what I did with Everett right on the phone was I opened up an Evernote in my smartphone, like just a note, like a list that I could keep. And I said, my Indulger. And I wrote the date, and I wrote how I was feeling, like the hurt, the trapped feeling, the pain that came right before deciding to make a change in my food. And I wrote what I did, you know what I mean? Like, I went out to eat instead of eating the food that I'd committed. I went out to eat, and here's how I was feeling, and here's how my Indulger swooped into a painful, like, unwinnable situation and tried to make it better with food. And Everett said, Susan, now that you see that's your Indulger, watch and notice whether just being aware of it now helps to shift it. Because sometimes with this parts work, as the self-compassion comes in, as you see in the moment, oh, here's me feeling triggered and wounded and hurt and freaked out this way. And here's where my Indulger is coming in and saying, let's eat over this. Sometimes just having those eyes on the situation shifts it. And I'm so excited to be tracking this now. This is the work that we're going to be doing at the family reunion, not just around the Indulger, but around all of the parts. Everett Considine has been putting together a BLE parts map. It's literally a map of the parts that get activated when you go on the bright line eating journey. And the Indulger is one of them, and the wounded little kid is another one. And I'll tell you another one. It's the isolator. And the controller. I already mentioned that, right? There's some predictable parts that get activated and are in play when you're trying to do bright line eating. And we're going to be talking about all this with an eye to self-compassion. Like, how can we understand our inner dynamics with the purpose of developing so much tenderness toward ourselves, and also with the purpose of living a life in our highest, most authentic self, which is something that I feel like I do almost all the time these days. That's why I was so excited to notice this Indulger part. And I was, happy to note also that the Indulger didn't make me go eat ice cream. You know what I mean? That wasn't the agenda. The agenda was just to go eat some, vegetables and protein outside of the house instead of inside of the house, which is huge improvement. I mean, in the past, that same indulging part might have hijacked my whole system and gotten me to go, binge on cookie dough. But instead, my system is pretty well aligned these days. And so I just noticed that decision to shift my food plan to a meal out. I mean, the rationale was that it was more convenient because I was in a time crunch. But I could tell it was my Indulger really wanting to ease my feeling of tension and overwhelm. So the I is to living happy, thin, and free, and aware and awake and engaged with our highest, most authentic self. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, we're going to be doing a pretty fabulous workshop for 3 days. It's going to be starting Wednesday night, June 27th. And then all day Thursday, June 28th, and all day Friday, June 29th, which happens to be my birthday. I'll be turning 44. And if you want to join us for any of that, it's happening live in San Diego, and it's been sold out for a long, long, long time now. However, we are live streaming it. And there's a button right down below if you want to join us for the live stream. You don't have to be able to be there live to do the live stream. You will get a recording that you can watch in perpetuity. So I do, however, recommend that you plan out within 2 weeks after the live stream, because we've developed a pretty fabulous course, Everett and I, and we're going to be offering it at the family reunion, and it's going to be starting July 24th. So if you want to be able to hop into that course, you want to make sure that you watch the live stream within 2 or 3 weeks after it happens. But if you want to join us, there's a link down below to register for the live stream. I'm going to be giving a scientific lecture on the science of self-compassion. Remember those 1,000 articles that I told you about? Everett's going to be presenting on the BLE parts map, and there's going to be workshop, sort of some writing questions, and people are going to get to sort of identify, what's your inner voice like? Like, how do you treat yourself inside your own head? Self-compassion is a fascinating journey, and in my opinion, there's not much that we would benefit more from than taking a look at the voices inside of our own head and the parts that are active inside of us as we move through the world, and taking a look at what they want, what they need, what their agendas are, and how sometimes they take over the ship. Just like my Indulger part got my car to drive right over to a restaurant instead of driving home. It's so interesting how we can get hijacked sometimes by these parts that have a specific agenda. And my Indulger at that moment just wanted me to be more comfortable, less freaked out. And so its solution was to take me out to dinner. Which, when I look at it that way, I have so much compassion, for that. Like, what a sweet thing. Thank you. Thank you for trying to help. In the future, as I know that my Indulger is being activated, maybe I'll make a different choice. So I can be living from my highest, most authentic self and not led around by my parts. I am loving exploring this inner landscape, and I invite you to join us for the family reunion. It's going to be wonderful. And if you choose not to, that's cool too. I'll still be here every week on the weekly vlog, and I'll see you next week.